Afternoon. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for the opportunity of speaking here as well. So far we've heard a lot about websites, we've heard a lot about CMSs, we've heard about platforms, and we've heard about internal systems to manage these things. I'm here to kind of flip it over a little bit and talk about students, but also how they connect to you. I'm also going to talk a little bit about learning. There's probably a bit of a tipping point in the kind of technology that's employed in learning, and that's going to become increasingly important to us. And I think you probably feel it in the zeitgeist that it might be important to you, but I get there's a bunch of people who work on the digital side of things, marketing or web management, that kind of thing. Maybe what does that have to do with me? I'm kind of guessing this is your, in some ways, this is your milieu, your environment. This is your view of the world. You're all probably quite digitally skilled. You have a web platform that you support. You're focusing on recruiting students. You're focusing on getting the right platform. You're focusing on cost or whatever it is, but you are skilled in digital. But you have a feeling. There's something inside you that says that maybe this isn't the full picture. Because deep down, there's people who understand digital, think about marketing. You know, maybe this is the kind of view really you need to have. In other words, a bird's eye view, and you're looking across the whole estate of a university, this being a particularly traditional one. I know it's not the entire of Oxford, but hey, this is the kind of view you think you need to be having. But because of this, I think maybe digital can feel a little bit like this to you. I've been thinking about this metaphor for a long while, but often it's the elephant in the room. It's very big, it's very unwieldy. It's hard to move, and it's bigger than you, and it's often bigger than any of your departments. And it's this that kind of has this atmosphere around digital that, to really make a difference, it needs to be institution-wide, but it's way bigger than you, and not enough people in the room are talking about it. It's very hard for you to get people to talk about it. So how can you move the elephant? How can you, in some ways, take the bird's eye view as web managers and from where you sit in the institution? Because often it comes from you guys where the change happens. Let's go on a story. This is a university, well, a college of a university. I picked a pretty one, formed in the 15th century, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, the person from Oxford. But the important thing to say about it was you can see who's in charge, right? It's a very grand architecture. They were the people in charge. They were setting the agendas. They were effectively the gatekeepers. And also, as time went on, university life, it was seen as a personal journey. We all kind of went on it. Not that many people went. But it's very much you could study philosophy, go work in the city, or you could just go and study philosophy for the sheer joy of it. That was acceptable. And more often than not, it was free. And weirdly, universities were actually ahead of the game technologically. This is the interface that I first started using when I learned how to use email the first time when I went to university. They were ahead of the game. Then, as it says on the slide, this happened. More people had to go to university. Debt came in as a way to finance it. And the jobs market changed around us. It didn't quite function the way it did when All Souls College opened, and even when those guys walking up the path were going to university. It's not the same world. What does that mean in real terms? These are probably numbers we're all familiar with. Lots of people work while they study. Lots of people have a lot of debt when they leave. And I think probably the most telling, only 45% of the students think university represents good value for money. And also, they have to make this judgment. The fact they're being asked whether it's good value for money is significant. And then you guys, the world's changed around for this as well. We've all probably been through it in the last recent days, but it's no longer a personal journey for us universities. We're being measured in the same way that maybe the students feel like they're being measured too. And it's all about numbers again, stats, information. Where do you fit into this? And we all know it. It's often the big T word. We talk about transformation. I think it's overused myself, but we have to recognise, I talked a bit about the changes in learning technology that were coming. We are in an age of what we would call, I guess, digital transition, or your organisations coining the word about transformation to adapt. So what does that actually mean for you? You effectively, as an institution, need to evolve your way of working in order to deliver upon your mission. I'll go in a little while into what that mission is. But in real terms, what it means, we tended to buy digital, you tended to buy IT from an efficiency or a business process perspective, and that's no longer sufficient to keep up with the beautiful butterfly or with the changes in learning, if that makes any sense. But actually, wait a minute, to fulfill your mission, what is a mission? What is a university's mission? I've just taken an example, I had a quick Google. I used to work at Goldsmiths a while ago. I thought I'd take Goldsmiths' mission. This is their mission statement from their website. We offer a transformative experience, there goes the butterfly again, generating knowledge, stimulating self-discovery through creative, radical, and intellectually rigorous thinking and practice. But what does the technology actually generally look like? There's a website we recruit through. There's an administration substructure, be it SITS or whatever, that we administer through. And then there's a VLE where we provide through. There may be sort of social networking type functionality through forums that effectively are delivering learning content through a repository often. I don't want to belittle it in terms of probably a lot of progress or advances that you guys are already doing, but let's take it as a model. But if you think back to that mission, I myself can't think of articulating how those three systems are really delivering on that mission statement that Goldsmiths was talking about, sort of transformational learning experiences, all that kind of stuff. So you could see where if you talk about a value proposition for a student, whether it represents value for money or not, the difference between what that mission statement says and what these systems deliver, you can see probably is quite a big leap. Now let's move a little bit more into learning, because ultimately, obviously students, universities have a strong research agenda, which we can touch on at another time, but they are about learning, they're about teaching. Now, some of you may be familiar, but this is a graph that came out of a famous research project in the 80s by a chap called Bloom, and the 2 sigma problem represents the difference in performance between people who are taught individually one-to-one and if they're taught in a class. And it's consistent, it's been measured in a number of different environments, and admittedly this was for school children, but I think it's still relevant. And what that 2 sigma refers to is that the performance of students was 2 standard deviations better when they were taught one-to-one, which basically means, I think it is, 90% of the students achieve the results that 20% of the students do in the control group. So you can see the difference is radical. And when he did this, he set up a challenge, Bloom. He said, you've got to imagine ways how, in the future, because it's a problem and we don't have the resource to teach everyone one-to-one, how can you resource it so that you can create a one-to-one type experience where everyone can benefit from that level of tuition? I was interested recently to hear from Professor Rose Luckin at UCL, who's taught a bit about this, and these are the kind of 2 conclusions she comes up with. One of the inevitable conclusions of this is that it's an important skill for the student to understand themselves or to build some kind of self-awareness about what they do and do not know, and that's as important as they sort of learn about how to tackle learning, how to tackle problems, how to have resilience, etc. And we need a curriculum to support that in that context. And the other one is, this is where automation comes in, because if you can deliver automation that adjusts learning spaces, you can maybe make some progress towards tackling that problem that Bloom laid down back in the 80s. But this does change the relationship with the university that we've talked about before, and this came from a Universities UK document really. Students value a personalised and collaborative relationship that gives them confidence that their universities care about their educational interests. So what this means, we're kind of going backwards, but digitally speaking, I would suggest. And that means, actually, their experiences there do need to be personalised, and they need to be responsive, and there needs to be some sort of emotional connection involved, emotionally rooted in who they are. And it's not just about delivery of learning, it's about the experience surrounding learning, and there's some very reasonable, statistically proven ideas to suggest that that's actually essential. And we've got a whole load of information now, so you're thinking, fantastic, maybe we can deliver on this automated place. The problem is, I think, that because of the way we've tended to build up our systems like we talked about, students become categorised like this. They're a series of binaries. They become a passer of exams or a failure of exams, because that's how you write them down in SITs. They become attenders or non-attenders of lectures, because that's how they get registered. They might become visitors or non-visitors of libraries, and they become undergrads and postgrads. Because that's the kind of data you have, you'll have your way of how you understand the students. Learning analytics is beginning to try and make this a bit more complicated, but it's still kind of functioning with the same data sets primarily, but there are some interesting things going on. I picked out a few around the world. Georgia State University did something very fascinating. They realised that people from lower income backgrounds tended to not finish their degrees within 6 years. I think it's a 4-year process in the States. And they took a whole load of information, all their data sets across the entire university, and they tried to identify mappings to see if they could work out why. And they did see some correlations. They built a dashboard that allowed them to identify students who needed some engagement. And actually they did it. They managed to get rid of the difference that people from low-income backgrounds do tend to take the same amount of time as the rest of the cohort. And interestingly, that saves them money because they do it quicker. And it gives the university more money because they lose less students. So it's a win-win. Open Universities in Australia, based from 7 universities, a variety of sort of online learning materials. They developed a system called PASS. And that has a model of the student. It has a student model, i.e. where they come from. It has a learning model, their interactions with their systems, and a curriculum model based upon the description of their curriculum. They bring them together. They see if students are failing in certain modules. They maybe offer someone other different modules to help them get along. And Nottingham Trent, the interesting thing about this is a dashboard that shows your metrics and your engagement metrics against your cohort, your performance engagement against your cohort, and the students could see them as well. So the students could look in and see how they were doing against their peers, and that was a useful motivator or source of understanding for them and also for their teachers. So you can begin to see it within this existing model that we have. But I would like to encourage everyone to flip the thinking a bit. So the thinking here is, a student who's deemed to be at risk, a bit like Georgia, may benefit from an intervention. A human calls them up. But I'd ask you to encourage to think this, what if in fact the degree they're doing for them is the wrong one in the first place? It's not actually adaptive, you're merely supporting the old model. So in other words, they're at risk because they're doing the wrong degree, and that's the better way to look at it. Or, same thing again, they're an unengaged student, they may benefit from an intervention, but what happens maybe if they are actually suited to a less technically driven model? One that actually means that some people might benefit from a high broadband, don't want to see the teacher very much type model, but others might not, and that's the flexibility of it. How do we get there? And I would encourage this is the approach that you can take. So qualitative insight means market segmentation means digital and data. So qualitative insight is actually going out from a platform stroke institution agnostic place where you go and find out in the same way that market research used to do what they wanted, what they needed. I want to get a job in 5 years, I want to be a medic, I want to stay with my mum. You really begin to understand the students as themselves from that qualitative perspective. You combine it with established techniques that come off some psychology of segmenting them based on tastes, not based on whether they want to be an undergrad or not, but using statistical methods to give it some validation, and then you connect that to your digital systems, a digital service design, and the data that you have. And this is a tool set that allows you to make some difference in this domain. Some dimensions hopefully you're familiar with. It's axes along which you can build data, so how you could understand it. And here are some that you can think about. Locality. So if someone is really actually wanting to stay at home, they might live in Birmingham, they don't particularly want to travel, then actually maybe a library-driven model may be better for them. It could be that they're an international student, there are different learning styles all around the world. Motivation, why are they doing it? Explorative, they're very dedicated to finding a particular job. Learning style, sit back, be told, rote learners. Connectedness, actually how much do they like using technology, yes or no? Or passive or active, some people do actually genuinely consume stuff passively, some people go and seek it out and want to feel like they're seeking out. These are some dimensions in which you can begin to understand your students that are slightly different from the ones that we're used to. But hey, that's a lot of theory. Let's talk a bit about some practice. This is the University of Western Australia. And here they very much did this thing where they mixed qualitative research, generating insight, with patterns of analysis of digital. Now the patterns of analysis of digital we're talking about here is ways of using or interacting with the main sort of front-end website. So they came up with this. So there's two sort of categories of student I can talk about. So let's talk about Ryan. Now, Ryan fell into the category of being fuzzy. And fuzzy meant he wasn't sure of his career path. In other words, he wasn't sure which course he wanted to take. And what that meant was, in this case, the system was designed to give them an explorative way of working out what course they wanted to do based on who they were. But Ashley was a high achiever. She knew exactly what she wanted to do. And there the message was, right, we'll take you to exactly to the medical degree you want to do, and we'll tell you why it will take you to the place you want to go to. And you can see two very different models, which from a website recruitment perspective made a significant difference when we did it. But, this is what I'm saying, think further. The fuzzy student may not just need a fuzzy way of discovering courses, he might need a fuzzy explorative education process in of itself, not just a personalised recruitment experience is what we're talking about here. And the high achiever might actually need a dedicated path. They might want a 2-year degree, because really, why do it in 3 if they're bright? Or they might want to do it with more professional development around it. And this is where I come to in terms of where people from here, as you sit there on the cusp of digital and often motivators in digital, you actually have the capacity to make a difference in this domain and make a difference to the university model in general. So some things to start taking home. Personalisation is what I was talking about. It's a way of customising what you offer. But when you introduce that concept, you introduce the possibility that you can redesign the whole service. So it's not just about recruitment. You have the capacity within, you're taking the first steps with CMS or thinking beyond CMS or platforms, etc. But you're taking this first step to actually redesign the service design of a university. And if you're aware of some of the stuff that's going on in the zeitgeist, it means you're taking the first steps to doing something quite radical. But not only that, if you think about it from a purely sort of competitive point of view, it enables you, in this environment of TEF, international recruitment, Brexit, and all of that, to actually define the niche of the university that you may be attending. It may be particularly good in a discipline. It may be particularly good in a style of learning. But there are opportunities here for you to define the brand of the university and how you do it at this digital level, and that's what this toolset offers you. But really, where do I start, you might be saying? Our mantra, think big, start small, act quickly. So, think big. We have a tendency, or many of you here work within conventional procurement processes, and they tend to buy systems. They might buy work from agencies like us, but they tend to be vendor-driven. A vendor comes along and says, I've got this solution to this problem, buy my software. And then you'll come up with a business case why you need a particular piece of software, a particular system, or you will compare 3 systems to deliver you to a business outcome. We would say that you need to shift it and that you might begin to pursue against outcomes for the institution as a whole. I might want to deliver, you might procure 3 different systems to deliver on the outcome that you need to with student recruitment. Or you might have a student retention aim, and that might involve a combination of qualitative insight, understanding which students will stay, plus the means to target those students. You can't think in a system-only kind of way, and that's what digital asks of you. To really make a difference, it's probably something you all know, this needs to be articulated at an executive level, because when you start entering into the world of instructional design, learning, recruitment, retention, that's of interest to the executive office. And if you want to extend this procurement model to deliver the outcomes that you want, they need to be involved. And finally, perhaps maybe one of the most important ones is there is no such thing anymore as a digital strategy, in the sense that often, say, a VC might put you over to say, well, this is the head of digital. And that kind of broadly means marketing, comms, it might mean the website. But in fact, because of some of the transformations we've been talking about, digital is going to pretty much underpin everything you do. It's going to be an element of meeting the strategic objectives of the university right across from academic through to life cycle, through to recruitment. And in fact, digital is just part of the strategy. You can't have a strategy without digital. And actually it starts with realising that and not putting digital as a separate body that sits over here doing digital things. Start small. You don't have to necessarily, it's very difficult to start a massive project that will influence all departments. And this is what I call the virtuous circle. You see it has a data, user models, and product design. And what it means is you can start at any of these points and you can make a difference. So let's say start with data. I talked a bit earlier that you might want to connect retention to an understanding of which students stay. So what that means is getting the data sets that you have about which students stay is a bit like the Georgia State example, and you start with data. You go, what questions can I ask of the existing data that I have? I could work out which students stay. I could work out if students from abroad perform better in exams, but you make sure you ask the right questions of data, and that's an individual project in itself that you can do. And then that informs a new set of user models, which that informs your service design, and that again creates better data points, because you might have realised there's a gap in the kind of data that you're collecting that means you can't achieve your aim. So through improved user model and product design, you'll start generating that data. The virtuous circle goes on. Or you can take the approach starting with the user model, say the qual approach. You go out there, you do a big segmentation, you really understand what motivates your students, what they need, why they're coming, and that allows you to improve the product design. That will generate data that you can then refer back to this improved user model. The virtuous circle goes on. Or you can just take an R&D type approach. I've got an idea, I think this might work, I'm going to prototype it. and then the data will give you the evidence that you need, the user models get driven, but at least you've got an evidence base to work with. In terms of acting quickly, someone somewhere needs to be responsible and formulate the leadership for this. And it's possible as digital enablers within your organisation for you to be the people that do this, but that virtuous circle gives you almost the evidence base and methodologies to start articulating to your leadership at that VC type level what needs to happen, how to get it going. You need to be cognizant of designing within the context of the overall objectives of the university, the mission of the university, your own specific departmental objectives in terms of recruitment, a personalisation model that fits. And I don't want to overcomplicate it. It could just be, if only I could split my service design and my website user journeys based on whether they're local or not. But just begin to articulate in your own mind what those models might look like. And then imagine using the virtuous circle. How can I make my service do that? How can I alter it so I do get the data points that I need? As you keep going around the circle, you'll be able to articulate to your leadership better why and how this will work. And above all, it's probably, we've talked about content here, you need to connect it to content, and that be it learning content, because it's no point having a personalisation model if there's not different types of content to connect to the different pathways. And that brings me to the end. We're going to be talking a lot about this in our workshop afterwards, if you want to go, and we're going to try and imagine about how you can tease out some of these ideas around leadership and personalisation and content into real projects that you can achieve in your own institutions, and how you can maybe begin to dig into the virtuous circle yourself and think about the data, the user models, and the personalisation that you can maybe employ yourselves to achieve the mission of your university. So thank you.